It's time for the Double Stop with Brian Sword. Welcome to the Double Stop. I'm Brian Sword, and welcome to the first show in the new schedule. If you didn't hear last week, I've announced that moving forward, I'm going to have the show every second week. Now, this week on the show, I've got an interview with guitarist Tim Donahue. For those who don't know about Tim, he's probably the first guy to play fretless guitar. Now, right now, Bumblefoot gets a lot of attention for playing fretless, but Tim's been doing it for many, many years prior to Bumblefoot. Tim has also been primarily based in Japan, which is another reason why he may not have the presence he deserves in North America. So let's jump right to it. Here is my conversation with Tim Donahue.
Tell me if I am dreaming. I was born in Niagara Falls, New York, right across the border from Canada there, my family, my mom played piano basically, so I got a good dose of Debussy when I was a child, and that had a huge impact on me. So that's it, Brian, right there.
So what was your first musical instrument then? I think you play a few, right?
Well, she had me playing the piano when I was like 3 or 4. And that's when I started to see colors in the music, you know. That's the synesthesia thing that I now know what it is. But it started when I was, 3 or 4. But then I didn't really take to the piano. I was just playing fourths and fifths all day. I must have had some Gregorian influences from a previous life, because I'm just got fourths and fifths. I banged on the piano all day, and I just loved the resonance of low, down on the lower register, the fourths and fifths, and drove my mom nuts, because I'd literally be banging on them I wouldn't stop. I remember this vividly. I'm not joking. I was 15 minutes straight. I'd just be banging on fourths and fifths, So that ended, but it left an impression on me, obviously. So then, I went to a Catholic school with nuns, and like real nuns, and real priests, and real scandals, and all of that. It was real, and that's when I started to play guitar, because they wanted me to play for the folk mass, and so I started playing folk masses with the nuns, and I think I lasted through one mass, because I started to do all these, all these runs. I wanted to be the lead guy, so, well, enough of him. So then I just kept going from there, and it was something I always wanted to do. By the time I was 13, I knew I wanted to do it. I just never had the opportunity to get an electric guitar in my hand, and that was my opportunity. So that's it, Brian. When I was 13, I started to just play guitar.
So you started on acoustic then?
No, actually, it was electric. And the masses themselves had to be done on acoustics, obviously. But as I recall, I think it was electric. So it was kind of a progressive school. Actually, that school, it's funny that we're talking about this now, because it's coming full circle now with my latest project. The nuns there were very much into Jesus Christ Superstar. And so they actually bought the album. There's a 4-album set. I don't know if you know. And this is back in the late 60s, early 70s. And my gosh, they actually took us to Broadway, and I saw Ian Gillan act.
Oh, wow.
One of the rare times he did it. Jesus Christ Superstar. And I was just, must have been 6th grade, not even 6th grade, 7th grade. And it left a huge impact. So we'll talk about that later, because that's what my next project is related to.
Okay, great.
Yeah.
And learning guitar with a bunch of nuns. Okay, so did you take lessons outside of the school? Like, how did that happen?
No. I just walked in one day, and they were playing, and I said, "Hey, I want to play too." And then they just showed me a few chords. I think it was like, C and G, and that was it. And I took to it real quickly, so they didn't really have to show me much after that. But that was it. No, I never took lessons or anything like that.
Now, do you think your musical background in piano, did that play a part to why you could play it so fast?
No, not really. I don't know. Probably just for having seen the Beatles on Ed Sullivan and and seeing the Beatles when they went to, I think it was Shea Stadium, was it, in New York? This is back 64, maybe 65. And to actually see that on TV and watching the Beatles every Saturday morning. They had an animated cartoon series, The Beatles, and it was on every Saturday. And the music just completely knocked me out, So, and it's all, of course, guitar music. So I think that had more of a reason to do with why I played the guitar. So probably, and then Hendrix. I mean, Hendrix. I just loved his music more than his guitar playing, but it was guitar based. So
okay, so you're in your early teens and you're playing guitar. When did your first band start happening?
Well, it was actually at the school when I was 13. I got a bunch of guys together, believe it or not, and there was actually a bassist and there was a drummer, and we started playing. And I don't know, there was no direction. There was nowhere to direct us, and of course I had just started. Everyone had just basically started, but it just came together from there, and just that was the first time. So as soon as I picked up the guitar, I already formed a band like a month
right.
later.
Yeah.
So it just kind of happened quickly, and it just grew from there.
And then when you finished your kind of high school years, did you pursue music in terms of post-secondary school?
Oh yeah. Actually, I had this goes along with this first question. I had to make my first electric guitar because my parents were not so happy with me playing the guitar,
Yeah.
let's say. So I actually made my first guitar because my dad, he had access to good quality mahogany, and he is an engineer, and he has a lot of tools. So anyway, I made my first guitar. Really, I made the whole thing, and
wow,
that really started. That it has continued to this day with all my guitar products. But that had a big thing to do with it. So yeah, it started with making the guitar and playing it. So I just continued that throughout, after high school. Of course, I went to Berkeley after I graduated from another college. My father, as I said, he's an engineer, so he had kind of pushed me to go towards engineering, which I have that inside of me as well. I have that engineering thing inside of me. That's why I make all kinds of things, but it all comes from the same creative place, so but anyway, he wanted me to go to engineering school and be in RIT. I don't know if you know RIT, Rochester Institute of Technology, and and I was going to go there. But then after I finished the first college that I went to, I had always continued playing. I mean, I was more busy with playing than the work in college, and I think I was majoring in math or something, differential equations and those kind of things. That's what I majored in, and preparing to be an engineer. So, but all the time I was always coming home and finishing my college work, the homework and all that before I came home every night. And then when I was home, that was strictly music time for me. So after I graduated from that, I says, no, this is what I should be doing, and I went to Berkeley after that, and that was that.
So how many years did you do the engineering?
Well, the preparation for the engineering was 2 years, a 2-year college.
Okay, so you went to college for 2 years, and then you switched over and went to Berkeley.
I went to Berkeley, yeah.
And how was the audition process to get into Berkeley?
Well, it's a good question, because right now I actually prepare students in Japan for their audition. That's
really?
One of the things that I do on the side, yeah. Well, they want to have people that can basically play, to be honest with you, put it lightly, because you have to know your instrument well in order to get into the university, because you're going to be taking arranging classes and harmony classes and composition courses, and you have to be able to play what you're going to write on the score. So if you're not a pianist, whatever instrument you play, you're going to have to be able to translate what you're writing into something that sounds good, and that's from playing your instrument. Now, if you don't know your instrument well, if you're not somewhat of a good player, then that's one reason not to be able to get into Berkeley. So the audition really checks out how well of a player you are, and also a big part of the audition, this isn't an advertisement for Berkeley, but one of the true things is they want to check out your musicality. You might not be incredibly technically proficient, but if you're if you demonstrate musicality, phrasing and sensitivity in your playing, I think Berklee recognizes that. And actually, they say that they do place a big emphasis on musicality. So I remember that. I just remember playing jazz standards and maybe some rock stuff that, because I was 18 or 19 at the time. So yeah, that's what I recall. Those kind of things are part of the audition.
And how was your experience there? Did you enjoy the program?
Great. And it was great because I was doing my own thing. I took to it so quickly. The first semester when you get there, it's amazing because you don't really know if you can cut it,
Yeah.
Because there was a rumor going around during my first semester there, and the rumor was I think it was like 75% of all new students drop out in the first semester at Berklee. So you've got this, this in the back of your mind, and you're wondering, can I cut it? Can I cut it?
Yeah.
And, obviously, I graduated, and it was great the whole time. And the reason it was great because the teacher was so receptive to what I was doing. And I was playing fretless guitar at the time. I was playing fretless back.
Already? Really?
Yeah, before I went to Berklee. That's when I made my first fretless. So I brought it to Berklee, and I was playing jazz all throughout Berklee on fretless guitar. And this is in 1980. And I graduated on fretless guitar from Berklee. And the reason I was able to do that was because the teachers, they said, wow, they said, go for it. This is great, And not one of them ever said to me, no, man, don't do that. It's too weird, it's too out or something. They were all very supportive. And, when you're young and you're doing something that's new, at that time, not that, I don't know anyone else that was doing it, and I didn't really care. It's just what I wanted to do, To have that kind of support, it just gave you that launch that you need after you leave Berklee, So that was why I'd enjoyed Berklee most of all. They were very supportive of what I did.
Okay, so when did the actual idea come to you to try to do a fretless guitar? Do you remember?
Yeah, Weather Report. Heavy Weather, that album.
So based on Jacko or
Jacko.
Based on something else? Yeah, it was strictly a Jacko thing. Yeah, okay.
Well, the tone the tone that spoke to me was Jacko's tone. But I'm a guitarist. I didn't want to play bass, but I wanted to approximate or get somewhere close to that tone that you could not get with a normal guitar. And as I had told you, I'd made my first guitar in the first place. So I continued building guitars throughout my whole high school and university days. So that's why I was able to develop my first fretless, and that's the one I took to Berklee, and I still have it today.
Now, when you started trying to play fretless, was it a big transition to play? Because it's one thing to play a bass in one note at a time, but when you're trying to do chords, it sounds like a different beast. So how quickly were you able to wrap your head around it and be able to play fretless?
Well, you're still, the learning never ends. So that's all I play now, right? But I still feel like I'm just starting, But I went through Berklee on it, right? So, my gosh, I don't know what's that?
I just mean as a teenager, when you first made your first fretless and then you start trying to play it, was it a difficult transition at that point, or did it come pretty quick?
Well, there is certainly some difficulty because you just can't plop down. Well, I shouldn't say that. At that time, I just couldn't plop down a chord and play like you can on a regular guitar. You have to be careful. But the whole thing about it is your ear. It just gets your ear to where your ear should be anyway. No matter what instrument you're playing, you should be able to, really, really hear what you're playing, as opposed to just going through the motions of placing your fingers on a particular fret and knowing the note will be in tune,
Right. Yeah.
So it really forces you to understand what you're playing sonically and also what's the word, theoretically, music theoretically,
And do you remember the reactions when people first saw you start playing a fretless guitar?
Well, mostly it was the band members, because the bassist played fretless fretless bass, and he was great. He played an old Gibson Ripper. I don't know if you remember the old Ripper, and it was fretless. And most people, if they played fretless, which there really weren't that many people at that time. I mean, Jocko was, of course, king, and he still is in my book. But this particular bass player that I was with, he had a black fretless Ripper, and it sounded great. And he looked at me, and I looked at him. And that was it. We loved it. It was just great. And this is 1978 and 79.
Oh my God, I had no idea it went back that far.
Oh, yeah,
That's amazing.
Yeah. So, and it was a really good reaction. I mean, and then as I said, as I went through Berklee, the whole reaction was really positive. I didn't really get any you're too weird or none of that, because it sounded so cool. It was just such a cool sound, and then. And the challenge of trying to make it express, what you want to express, that's the whole thing about it. I mean, it's the challenge of playing any instrument, really, is to get it to express what you want to express. So I just happened to go in that direction. So. And
the other students must have lost their mind at Berklee when they saw you with that.
Well, I don't know. I mean, yeah, I don't. Yeah, I mean, the teachers were more, they were more excited than the students. I don't know if the students particularly cared, to be honest with you. They probably just thought I was just some weird guy, because there isn't any impression on me as far as what the reaction was from the students. But from the teachers, they were really excited. So.
Well, it's brilliant that you had that kind of environment where the teachers are so supportive.
Yeah, absolutely. I mean, because you have to remember at that time. Now, I mean, Berklee, they've got every genre of music. They've even got, record scratching, and hip hop.
Right.
And this stuff that I would never imagine Berklee having, it's like the Montreux Jazz Festival, it's all those things that they've got. You'd never imagine that they would have had that 30 years ago,
Right.
But at Berklee at that time, it was, I would say it's 90% jazz, and I was just coming out of playing like Van Halen type of music from my bands before I went to Berklee. We were playing that kind of music, but I really wanted to get into jazz, and I just happened to have the fretless guitar with me. Of course, I had a Gibson ES-175 hollow body because I really wanted to play in the big band, the Count Basie big band in Berklee. So I did that too, But then again, I was also doing that on the fretless guitar. So it was, some people noticed and some people didn't, and it didn't really matter, as long as it worked, as long as you can get it to work. So.
Okay, so when you finished Berklee, what moves did you make? What was your big plan to conquer the world?
Well, I'm in Japan, as you know.
Yes.
And the reason I'm in Japan, basically, is because I went to Berklee, because I knew more people from Japan in Berklee than I did from other parts of the world. And in Berklee, there's people from all over the world, but most of the people that I took to, for some reason, were from Japan at that time. And actually, my girlfriend at the time, who later became my wife, she was also at Berklee. So, of course, that has a big influence on falling in love in your first semester at Berklee, And so after I graduated, and the reason I'm saying this is because after I graduated from Berklee, literally a few days later, I was in Japan. I flew to Japan, and from there I knew that I could start playing, and playing more importantly, composing, because I was composing the whole time. I'm constantly composing, and that started when I was, in high school. So that continued all throughout Berklee at a very high pace. And then after I left Berklee, I wanted to be able to, do what everyone wants to do, make albums and perform and tour and do all these things that you have these dreams of doing. And Japan, the logistics of having all these people who are already professional musicians, they went to Berklee and went back to Japan. I was able to come here and start immediately into a performance and recording career immediately.
Your early 20s, mid 20s or so, somewhere in there. Mm-hmm. So as soon as you finished Berklee, did you go to Japan or did you permanently move there?
Well, I didn't plan on moving, to be honest with you. I just planned on coming over and staying with at that time, my wife's parents' home, and just feeling out where I would like to, stay. I mean, because you're just out of you're just out of university, and you want to play. You want to perform. You want to do all those things. But it just happened that Japan was very what's the word, conducive to doing that very quickly for me. So it just fell in place. I wasn't planning on moving, I should say, but then again, I was probably open to the idea. I can't really recall, but I ended up staying, and it's been great. So that's basically it. I stayed in Japan, and everything happened here. And this is long before the internet. I mean, this is long before computers. God, I mean,
Yeah,
CDs.
we're talking
This is
early 80s. So we're talking 82, 83 then, right?
Exactly, 82, right. And CDs were just a rumor,
Yeah.
And the first album I did was actually in America on an actual vinyl record that came out in 1986 or 5, I can't remember. And I was wondering, wow, man, someday this will come out on CD, wow. And those were the days when things were really exciting, not that they aren't today, but for me they were very exciting because with the prospect of having digital, audio, that whole world was developing. The whole digital audio realm was developing, and MIDI was really being accepted, and I started playing MIDI on the fretless guitar and all this digital stuff that kind of comes over you as like a wave. That was the time of all these innovations that have transformed, making music, I should say. Not the music itself, because I'm not so sure the music is any better now than it was back then, but the way that you make music and the way that you listen to music and enjoy music was starting to develop back then.
So that first record, that's Fifth Season, right?
Yeah, exactly, right.
And what led to the recording of that record? How'd you get the deal, and
wow.
how's the experience?
Oh, my God.
Long story,
great.
is it?
Well, I was in Japan, and to be honest with you, I was having a hard time finding players that I really wanted to play with. Even though I had come to Japan because I knew a lot of players, and while I was here, I became, acquainted with all kinds of players. I mean, an amazing amount of players that you would never expect you'd find in Japan in those days, and at the same time, I was having a hard time finding people that I really thought could express what I wanted to express in my music. So I was really longing to get back to the States, to be honest with you. I think, oh gosh, I got to do this in the States. This music is for, actually, I don't want to make this too long, but I was very much into ECM, ECM out of Germany, and I think they're still in existence. The record label ECM, and Jan Garbarek, and even Pat Metheny was on the early recordings. That record label really had a huge impact on me. Just the music just spoke right to me. Miroslav Vitus, his recordings, all this music really spoke to me. So my music naturally went in that direction, which is kind of ethereal jazz. They call it jazz, but many times it's not swinging. It's not swing. It's very ethereal. I don't know if you know John Abercrombie or not.
I don't know.
Okay, these are guys that have laid the groundwork for a lot of modern jazz that we hear today.
Okay,
but it's not bebop. It's not John Coltrane, and it's not Cannonball Adderley or Charlie Parker. It's not that kind of groundwork. But getting back to your question, the music was very much in those in that realm. So I was having a hard time finding players here. So I had sent a tape into Mike Varney. I don't know if you know who Mike Varney is.
Oh, yeah. His name comes up every second interview.
Okay.
Yeah.
Mark Varney's great. I really have to hand it to Mike Varney because I sent him this tape, and it was us in Japan. It was a recording of us playing this music that I was doing at the time, and it's this very ethereal jazz, you might call it, and it's very much along the ECM lines. Now, Mike Varney, if you know, he's very much, he's open to anything. I mean, I'm not speaking for Mike Varney, but from what I know of him, he's very into guitar-oriented rock, knock your socks off kind of stuff. But at that time, my stuff was this fretless, ethereal jazz with acoustic bass and acoustic drums, and it was completely from left field. I thought he'll never, he'll never even give it the time of day. Well, lo and behold, he writes it up in Guitar Player magazine.
Was that the Spotlight column?
Yeah, in the Spotlight column. Can you imagine?
Great.
And I didn't even know it. I mean, because I was in Japan, and
of course
we don't get Guitar Player magazine over there.
Oh, amazing!
So he wrote it up, and a producer in California, he read it, and that was it. And he contacted me, and we sent stuff. I sent stuff back and forth to him, and it was, I don't want to speak for him either, but he was completely blown away, and as was Mike Varney, because what he wrote, I couldn't even believe what he wrote. I couldn't believe it. He's talking about me, my God, the stuff that he wrote, I had never heard him write anything like that before, because I had read, other Spotlight columns.
Sure.
I don't know where, but I know I've read other ones, and I had never heard anything like what he had written. So apparently this producer, was bowled over as well. So things progressed, and within a year, I was in Mad Hatter Studios in Los Angeles. He flew me over, and that's Chick Corea's studio. So it was very well equipped studio, and using Chick's engineer and his staff, and it was a dream come true. Here I am out of Berkeley and playing this music in Japan, which I really think should be played in Europe and or America, and yet, I wasn't able to really fulfill, the music as I wanted to. As I just said, I wanted to play with other people that could really express the music. Then I went to America to do this album, and that really, that's how that came about. It was through Mike Varney and a Spotlight column, and it's like a dream. You know what I mean? It's that time.
Amazing.
Yeah.
Now, for the sessions for that record, was it a very quick? Was it like a lot of the Shrapnel stuff is back then was we're going to be in a really good studio, but you have 10 days, and you go in and you just pound it out. Mm-hmm. Was it like that, or did you have a lot of time? How is the recording process itself?
I can't say that we had a lot of time. I mean, I'm just trying to recall specifically, but I'm sure we didn't have a lot of time. But I think we had, something like 10 days. And at that time, to be honest with you, I had never punched in a part. I had never fixed a part. I had never edited anything. At that time, everything is done on 24 track, there's
tape.
There's no, tape. So but you could, there was punching in and that kind of thing. And there was automation. We had George Massenberg's automation system on the, I forget what board it was. I think it was SSL or something like that in Chick's studio at that time. So again, spending a lot of time in the studio at that time wasn't really necessary for us, because we were already like bam, bam, bam. We could get in there and play the whole piece without really fixing anything. So I was never used to fixing anything, because the reason I mention that, because that's what takes a lot of time, is when you're fixing parts and you're redoing parts and you're overdubbing parts and doing all of that. We didn't really do much of that. We just bam, 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 and if I had a solo to take, bam, 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 I did it, and I don't recall it taking a lot of time, which is good for the producer, because time is money, so yeah.
And how was the response to the record?
Oh, it was great. God, I mean, we couldn't believe it. I couldn't, because it got now that time, you have to remember, at that time, of course, again, there's no internet, there's no computer. So everything was by, physically getting the album out to people and performing. So I was performing in Los Angeles quite a bit at that time. And it was in promotion for that album. Now, the album was, I don't know if people don't even know this, but it was voted like the best, one of the top 5, in the top 5 jazz albums of 1986. And in that list was Miles Davis, and John Scofield, and all these guys that we know. And here's my album in there with this. And it wasn't just one critic who wrote it, there were two critics that had the same result. They put the album in the top 5, and they voted it in the top 10 albums of like the 80s or something. I couldn't believe it. We really couldn't believe it. So that was how well the album was received. And I know the producer was very happy because, you never know. You just don't know if people are going to love it. I mean, sometimes you think people are going to love it, and then it doesn't fly.
Yeah.
So I was word vindicated, or so. What should I say? Or it was confirmed. His hunch. So yeah, it was really, really well received.
And at this point, you're still living in Japan, but doing a bunch of work in LA to perform it and promote it.
Yeah. Well, no, actually, I was actually moved to LA it ended up being 3 years.
Oh, okay.
And I had not really planned on staying there. I just planned on performing the album and then coming back to Japan because I was still a resident. So yeah, I was just there to perform, and that was great too. I mean, God, just looking back, I don't even think about this, of course, on a daily basis. You never think about these 30 years ago, but God, all the people that I was able to play with. And I did a lot of opening concerts. I opened for a lot of people. I don't know if you know Jean-Luc Ponty.
Oh, yeah, absolutely.
Yeah, I mean, Jean-Luc Ponty, he was great, and he just loved the music. And my mother went to see a concert of his up in upstate New York after he played with me. After I played with him, actually, and he was using my music as people were coming into his show. He'd play my music through the system.
Oh, wow!
And that's she knew it was my music, and so that's how I knew that he really enjoyed my music because he'd use it before his concerts.
Proud mom moment, right?
Proud mom moment, yeah, absolutely. And of course, he never told me, but she told me that hey, she's music. And I thought, wow, that's just a nice compliment. So all these things, people are supportive of you. And it just kind of pushes you along.
So then your follow-up record, that's Brief Departure, I think? So
yeah.
I'm not really too aware of that one. I just saw it on your site. So what can you tell me about that record?
Well, I'll just tell real quickly. I was still in America at the time, and there were some things that I wasn't very happy with how things were progressing. So I wanted to get into another recording situation. So, because I was still with the producer that had made the 5th season, and he was great and everything. We had a manager. My manager was a guy named Robert Fitzpatrick, and he's the guy who put together Cream, and he was the Beatles lawyer when the Beatles were in America. So these guys were like,
that's cool.
Well, I shouldn't use the word well versed. They're very much a big part of the music industry. So we were working together, but things weren't kind of gelling in my mind. And of course, I was just probably getting I was probably getting a taste of arrogance now because of the success that I was supposedly feeling, So I wanted to do something more, get off. And which is totally, looking back, it's like, oh God, But that's why I got a record deal from a Japanese company, and at that time Japan was in their economic bubble, so there was money to be burned, and I don't remember how they got a hold of me, or I got a hold of them, or wait a minute, I think it was a production company that was part of a publishing company in Japan, and the publishing company is still in existence today. It's a very big publishing company called Retour Music, and they publish all the major music magazines in Japan. And at that time, they had wanted to branch out into a production company, and they had all this money apparently, and they actually asked me to interview, I think it was Billy Sheehan. Yeah, I was in Los Angeles, and of course I spoke Japanese at the same. I was fluent in Japanese somewhat, and so I think they wanted someone who could speak Japanese and write up the interview and interview Billy Sheehan. They just asked me off the cuff because was the guy from Toto. I can't remember the keyboard's name. The guy from Toto. So I got to do all these interviews, just for fun because they were asking me to do them. So we did Chick Corea, you know, and I think it was Billy Sheehan and the guy from Toto and all these people. And then for some reason, I don't know, they found out that I was also a recording artist. So then they asked me, would you like to do an album? And that was exactly the time I was looking to, you know, do another album.
Oh, perfect.
So, yeah. And that album really never came out because, as I said, they're a publishing company. They're not really a record company. So they had a lot of money to spend, and we produced the album. And it really was not released officially. Parts of it were on a 2006 album called Earlyworks.
Oh, okay.
Yeah, and that album is I'm very proud of that album because that's what the title means. You know, all the works from long ago that we were able to release. To shelve those tracks would have been such a waste, but they didn't come out at the time we made them. They couldn't.
Why not?
Yeah, they couldn't get. I think they couldn't get a licensing deal. They couldn't get a deal.
Oh, I see. So they financed it, but they couldn't actually get a deal with it after.
Yeah,
Gotcha.
they couldn't get a deal. I mean, so I just let it go, and then I came back to Japan here, and I signed with a big label in Japan called Nippon Crown, and then that was the big budget projects. You know, those were the big budget projects that I was able to do. So it's a good thing that I came back to Japan after having done those two main recordings in LA.
When you got back to Japan in kind of the early 90s, had the scene changed at all like it did in North America, or was it still somewhat in a bubble over there?
Yeah, it was in a bubble, and it actually still is, to be honest with you, in many ways. But yeah, it was still pretty much Japan is Japan and America's America. There's not much exchange going on. The jazz scene in Japan, I must say though, was always better than in America, and in Europe is the same way. You often hear a lot of, I should use the term jazz players. You know, I really don't want to use that term, but a lot of people who are known for jazz, they, you know, make more of a living in Europe, and at that time in Japan, there was JVC, King Records. Many record labels, even Nippon Crown, the label that I was signed to, they would support jazz very much. Supporting, meaning, you know, putting together a proper recording budget, advertising, doing all these things that you need to have done in order to make an album successful, you know. Those are the things that were very much, you know, part of the Japanese scene, I should say. But you'd never really know it, you know, because we're in a bubble over here. So
right.
So yeah, things are in a bubble, but things are definitely at that time in the early '90s, things were definitely creative and energetic and positive and very musical, at least for me. And it was a good move. It was a good move that I came back. So yeah, that's what it was like.
I'm very curious to what your experience was like. You said it was a big budget contract, but you're recording in Japan. What kind of experience was that based compared to your earlier experiences in America doing the recording?
Well, this would take up the rest of the interview. Well, wow, how should I say? You know, you're very lucky if you find someone, a producer specifically, that really loves what you do and who will, you know, go out on a limb for you. For my producer, his name was David Evans in America, and I love him, and I you know, to this day, I would do anything for him because he really, you know, he really went on a limb many times for me, and he really supported what I did. Now, to find someone like that again, I thought I'll never find anyone like that again, you know. Well, on a different level, I did find someone, a producer for, the label was Nippon Crown in Japan, and it's a major label in Japan, like EMI, like Columbia, all these big labels that we know. Well, there's another one called Nippon Crown, and the producer, he loved what I did. I mean, what can I say? And I really thought, my God, I'd never find someone like this again. So to have someone like that now with a big record label behind him, and all of that, I mean, they had major studios in Japan that were owned by that label, and their record labels got a 40-year history. Whereas the label in America, it was David Evans himself putting it all together. So, there was a difference in in the scale of the project. And so that was the big difference, I should say. The scale, in every way. Budget-wise, advertising-wise, the recording, situation, everything. It was just a different scale, but the energy was the same. They were very supportive, and it was really a great experience. But it happened here in the bubble.
And what was the response when that one did come out?
Yeah, it was great.
With that big engine behind pushing it too.
Yeah. Well, actually, it's funny because this is, as I was saying a minute ago, I might take up the rest of the interview on this, because what happens is the label itself was known for this kind of Japanese music, which is very traditional. How should I say? It's very predictable adult pop music. Should I say?
Right.
And it very, 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 very. It's so predictable. I mean, you can play two CDs at the same time, and they'd overlap literally. I mean, you wouldn't be able to tell them apart. Play them at the same time, it'd be the same chord progressions, the same singing, the same melody. And this has been going on for many, many years, and this label has become very successful with that formula. It's huge. Now the producer wants to get away from doing that formula, and he wants to do something that he always wanted to do, which is something completely the antithesis of what he has been doing. Therefore, to make a long story short, the record label did not know how to promote the album. He put the album together, and it was this ethereal, but it was beautiful. Jazz, but not jazz. It was something that you really cannot pigeonhole. Even in America or Europe, you would not be able to pigeonhole it in any genre at all. It had so much packed into this album, but it was very natural. It was just a completely natural expression of the music I wanted to do at that time. It's just that it was not marketable because it was something that the record label had never ever heard before. And I never forget. I was recording some part on the album, and I'm in the outside in the studio there, and the talkback mic in the mixing room was on, so I can hear what's happening in there, and you can imagine the Trogs. I don't know if you know the Trogs. If you don't know the Trogs, everyone log on to YouTube and listen to the Trogs tapes, okay? Eddie Kramer actually turned me on to the Trogs tapes after we were talking about his thing with Hendrix, and then he says, "Tim, you got to hear the Trogs." So anyway, it was kind of like that. But the point I'm trying to make is, I had heard my director talking to one of the administrators of the company, and one of the administrators pops into the mixing room, and sits down next to my director, and I hear them talking. Now, you remember, they're talking in Japanese, but I know what they're saying. So I'm just listening, and they're listening to playback. And when they stop the playback, the director, the administrator says, so this is what you're working on, huh? And I don't remember exactly the words he said, but he said, it's interesting, he said, it's interesting. He wasn't really he obviously didn't get it,
Yeah.
Because it was completely out of left field for him, But
totally.
But my director says, yeah, this is the greatest thing I've ever done, he said, And my director has been, he's made million-seller albums in Japan, And for him to say that, but he didn't know I was listening to him, So again, Brian, when you have someone like that supports your work, you're in the right place.
Yeah, totally.
So yeah, so that's what happened with that. They really couldn't promote it because they just did not know how to promote that kind of music. Although my director, again, he did a lot of the legwork. You know, I don't know if you've ever seen my performance of Norwegian Wood on YouTube. If you ever get a chance, log on to YouTube and see me playing Norwegian Wood on the fretless harp guitar. It's completely ethereal and out in left field, but people say it's incredibly beautiful, you know, is what people say. And that came about, that program, that it was on TV, you know, it was an hour-long TV program, and I was on that program because of this director. He did the legwork to get me on that program. And that kind of legwork he did because no one else in the company, in the advertising section, they couldn't do it. They didn't know how to do it. So, yeah. So it was great. The big budget, you know, we did the album with Paul Rogers. I did the movie soundtrack with the Philharmonic here. And we did, I did the other album, Into the Light with Kelly Hansen from Foreigner. You know, I did all these albums, 4 albums for this record label and this director. You know,
oh, interesting. Yeah,
huge budget. I never imagined. I mean, I won't tell you how much it was, but believe me, Motley Crue would have died to have the budget.
Really? Eh? Wow.
I'm not kidding. Yeah. No, it's not. It's no joke. The total budget that they've spent on all these albums, and that was because this one director, he believed in the music. So there you go.
Okay, so Voices in the Wind. You've got Eddie Kramer. Mm-hmm. You've got Paul Rogers. Mm-hmm. How did that come together? Because that's quite a crew you got.
Yeah, I mean, it's amazing. And this, you have to remember at that time, too, Paul Rogers had been, you know, he had done a lot of his most famous work by then. Of course, he joined Queen, right? He had joined Queen right after that. So this is in between before he joined Queen and after he'd done a lot of his other work. That he was in this kind of, not retirement's not the word. Maybe just like a break stage, you know.
Sure, but still already a legend at that point.
Oh yeah, for sure. And Eddie Kramer, you know, Eddie Kramer. I mean, anyone out there who knows, you know, the history of rock knows that Eddie Kramer is a huge part of the history of rock. I mean, he came about again because the first album, the producer who did my first album was named David Evans. He and I have still stayed in touch at that time, and I was signed to Nippon Crown, and they had all these big budgets that they were willing to give me if I came up with, you know, a project. And I had already wanted to do this project, but I had done the movie soundtrack in between, which is another big, you know, big project, big budget project that the company had okayed, and that was very successful. Therefore, we were able to go on and do this album with Eddie Kramer. So the producer, David Evans, put it all together for me in Los Angeles. And I don't know how he got Eddie Kramer, but he had sent a demo or something to Eddie or someone or through someone, and it reached Eddie, and Eddie said, yeah, let's do this.
Wow.
So, which is great because the record company wanted another producer, and I wanted another producer as well. And Eddie Kramer, I knew, you know, it would be Eddie Kramer. Work with Eddie Kramer, my God. So, make a long story short, we had a pre-production meeting in Los Angeles. We flew everyone out to Los Angeles for a couple weeks, and Eddie and all of us got together. And during that time, because the album was going to be instrumental, completely instrumental album, and if you know the history of Eddie Kramer, I can't remember a single instrumental album he's ever done. Now, I'm not saying he's never done one, but I don't know of one that he's ever done. So most of the albums that he's done, and the real famous ones that we know, Kiss and Hendrix and Zeppelin, you know, even Carly Simon, you know, they're all vocal albums. So he asked me, he says, Tim, if you could have a vocalist on your album, just off the top of your head, who would you want? You know, and he just asked me the question, and I said, God, I don't know. I mean, well, the voice of rock, Paul Rogers, you know. And he said, okay.
Makes a phone call.
Yeah, well, exactly. And so, make long story short, you know, again, we go back to Japan, and I'm still writing the score because everything was written out on that album. Everything that we played was written out, believe it or not, except for the improvised parts, which were few in between, actually. So anyway, I get back to Japan. We're writing out the score, and I get a call one day from Paul Rogers. And I said, Paul, what are you doing? He says, Tim. And I don't remember exactly, the exact conversation, but it was basically, Eddie contacted him, and he loves the tunes that I'm writing, because the tunes had the melody and everything already scoped out, so you could tell what the melody was going to be and what
Sure.
if he were to sing, that's what he would sing, and it spoke to him. It really spoke to him, Brian. So, make a long story short, that's how it all came about. We flew everyone. Paul came from, of course, London. I think Jazz Lockery was his bass player. Jazz is Scottish. So he flew, I think, from Scotland, was it? And the drummer's name is Tos Panos, and he just finished a thing with Steve Vai at that time. And so he's Greek. So he was in LA, so actually that doesn't count. So we brought him in. And we were from Japan. And we had some people there from Germany. I can't remember. So we had all these people from around the world coming together for like almost 2 months in LA to do this album. Now, just to give you an idea, when you fly everyone there, it's at the record company's, it's on the record company's tab. So just the logistics and the cost of flying everyone there and putting everyone up for that amount of time, you can imagine how expensive it was. And then recording, and then all the costs associated with getting the album done. It was a huge project, but they wanted to do it.
And that carried you into the light with Kelly Hansen, and he's one of my top couple of singers.
Oh.
So I do have that record right here in my hand.
Oh, great.
Which I do love this record. How did you decide, and how did you get to work with Kelly?
Good question.
And I'm curious, again, that's another one with the same record label. Like, it also came out on Frontiers, which is the copy I have. But
God.
Was that another LA recording, big budget project?
Good question. Well, the reason why Kelly, that's funny. The reason why Kelly was on that album, because when Eddie Kramer, what was it? I can't remember. I think Eddie Kramer had called Kelly when I was in LA. And actually, yeah, okay, I remember. As I was telling you, that pre-production meeting that we had in LA, Eddie asked me who, my favorite singer would be, and then I said Paul Rogers. And at the same time, I think Eddie called Kelly. Kelly's name had come up, or Eddie had worked with Kelly, maybe, I can't remember. But anyway, I talked with Kelly when I was there, and I can't remember exactly, but Paul ended up doing the album, right? We ended up deciding to do Paul. And so I called Kelly from Japan. I says, Kelly, I'm sorry. My original choice was Paul Rogers. I was honest with Kelly, and I loved Kelly's singing. I loved it very much, but I originally told Eddie that I wanted Paul Rogers, and Paul Rogers wants to do the album. So Kelly, will you do me a favor and promise me you'll do my next album? And I didn't want to just say, no, Kelly, we're going to get Paul Rogers. No, because that's not really good, I wanted to promise Kelly another album, and for me, Into the Light was keeping that promise,
Ah, right.
So, and I'm glad he did it, because Kelly was so much fun to work with, strictly by ear, well, Paul was too, but which is great, strictly by feel, so there wasn't much technical discussion of how to approach harmonizing a melody or something, which he harmonized by ear, which is fine, and which is great. So it was a new approach for me, because usually I'm doing something technical. Me and Eddie would say, let's harmonize this melody and put a third above or a fourth above. We'd talk technically like that. But with Kelly, it was very non-technical and very straightforward. And so that was great. It was fun, and the album came together as it did.
Is that an album that you're fond of?
Yeah, very much. Because I played everything on the album.
You did, yeah.
But yeah, it's just something you could say you did it. I don't want to do that every time, but at least I did it. And so it took a long time. But yeah, I love the music, and there's nothing that I would change on the album. Actually, I say on most of my albums, there's really nothing I would ever want to change. I really go through the pains to make sure that I'm not going to look back one day and say, "Oh, I wish I would have changed this. I wish I would have changed that." So I don't have those kind of thoughts about most of my albums. So yeah, so I'm happy with it. Mm-hmm.
Okay, let's jump up to Madmen and Sinners. You got James LaBrie. You got Mike Mangini, who is now in Dream Theater. He wasn't at that point, but he was had been in Extreme, and I think Steve Vai up to then. How did that project come together?
Well, after I did Into the Light, the music was changing, naturally inside of me. So it was going into more of a metal direction, and I had written a lot of music. It just comes out, quickly. So it came out very quickly after I did Into the Light, and it was in this metal kind of vein. So I had let a friend of mine, actually a dear friend of mine, a brother in madness and music journalism. His name is Carl Begay. He lives.
Oh yeah, sure.
You know Carl? Okay, he's just the sweetest guy, and I owe a lot of thanks to Carl because I let Carl hear the original demos for Mad Men, which were actually when most of the music was not actually on Mad Men eventually. So there's a lot of music that was not on Mad Men that was written before Mad Men that Carl heard. And I told Carl, I says, Carl, James LaBrie's voice would sound great on this. And my wife listened to Dream Theater at that time, but I never listened to Dream Theater. I always thought it was a little over the top for me. I wanted something a little more melodic for my taste. So I was not a big fan. Not putting them down or anything, but just that I was not listening to Dream Theater at the time. It wasn't my cup of tea. But my wife loved Dream Theater, so she had always played the album Metropolis, I think it was. So we went to see Dream Theater in L.A. and to kind of scope out James,
Yeah.
So we actually flew there, and we went to, I can't remember the place. It was this theater. There was a theater. It was a small theater, but it was a really nice place. And they played, and yeah, James sang his heart out. So after that, I talked with Carl Begay. He says, Carl tells me, he says, well, I know James, and James lives not far from where Carl was born in Toronto. Make a long story short, Carl put us together. He got the demo to James, and James, James wanted to do it, and that was it. And it's just one thing led to another, and like 2 or 3 years later, the album came about.
That was a different label. Did you still have enough budget that you actually worked together, or were you sending files?
No. I was flying here and there.
Wow. Okay.
The budget. Yeah, we had a lot of money. And of course, you have to remember that those albums, like Into the Light and Madmen Sinners, the record label does not own the album. I own the album, so I was able to retain the rights by licensing the album. So we licensed it around the world. Both of those albums, they were licensed around the world. But yet, at the same time, they still gave me these incredible budgets to work with, even though they didn't own the album.
Wow.
And even though the album was
not... That's the way to do it.
Yeah. I was very lucky because the album's not even made, and yet they're forwarding me. So these are things that you hear about, big rock bands, they get these big advances, and then they, it's like a dream of a lot of musicians used to have, I think. I don't think it's like that anymore, as you know, because things have changed over the years. But those are things that you always hear about happening to like, again, Motley Crue, they get this large advance, or Guns N' Roses and these kind of bands. Well, that's what happened to me for these 2 albums, and it's just me alone. So I was able to do, the album the way I wanted to do it, and pay everyone, what I wanted to pay them, what I thought was fair, and go to whatever studio I need to go to and do the rest of the work in my studio, because we had the budget.
So that takes us up to kind of mid 2005, 2006. Mm-hmm. What was the next record after that?
I think that was the
that the
Earlyworks.
Earlyworks, okay. So that pulled back some of the old material that hadn't been released yet.
Exactly.
And was that stuff that you owned already as well?
Yes. Well, some of it was not, because if you remember the brief departure discussion with that Retour Music publishing company, they owned the masters for that, and I got permission from them through another journalist in Japan who worked for them. I had not been in touch with them for 16 years at that time. So they still had I had the masters, but I couldn't do anything with the masters, because legally they owned the masters. So some of those tunes, some of the tracks from that album were from that Brief Departure album, and other tracks were stuff that I owned that I thought should be released, and now that was the opportunity to release them. I think it was on iPhone, iTunes.
Sure. Yeah.
Yeah, and that was from the producer, again, from David Evans, the first producer I ever met, and we've continued this relationship. I haven't heard from him lately, but on and off over these years, we've just done these albums, and I appreciate that. Mm-hmm.
I think we're up to more modern times, and I want to touch upon the harp guitar, as one thing, and then other modern projects. But but can you tell me about how the harp guitar came together, and what exactly is that?
Yeah, okay. Well, that goes way back now, 30 years, more than 30 years, when I was in Japan. That's a really good question, Brian. You should be on 60 Minutes or something. No, when I was in Japan, I was having, should I say, not problems, but I was having a little bit frustrations with, finding the right players, as I told you before.
Yes.
Even though I knew a lot of people, I was having to find the right people to play my music. So I wanted to play myself, just starting to play more solo stuff and not rely so much on other players in order to be performing or recording. So I developed the instrument where I could play the harp and the fretless guitar, and they just happened to come about as being, being able to play them at the same time, like literally playing the harp and the guitar portions, fingering them both at the same time. And that was the impetus for making the harp guitar, was to start a solo career. Okay.
Okay.
So that has continued, and now the guitars have been on the market now those guitars have been on the market for 4 or 5 years, and we've got players around the world now playing them and learning the technique, that I originally started to develop 30-something years ago.
And are you helping do you ever train anybody to play it, or they got to figure it out? Yeah, that's a big part too.
Yeah, for sure. I mean, there's a lot of people that come here to my home from around the world, actually. But every week I have people coming from Tokyo, and that's a good 2-hour, distance away. They'll come twice a week to my studio, and we'll just shed harp guitar technique and playing my music. And sometimes they might want to play something. We did a Bach piece recently, Ode to Joy, I think it was, and we did Fly Me to the Moon. We did Take 5. We'll do jazz things and all kinds of music, expressing it on the harp guitar, and that instrument is just, it's all there. I mean, that's the only instrument you really need, and you can do all the parts at once, with a lot of practice, of course. But it's a very, very, very satisfying instrument. But I'm not playing that too much anymore now, because I'm doing the Cage, the musical, the Cage. So that is, I'm completely immersed in that now. So.
And can you tell me about that?
Oh, the Cage, yeah. I'm so happy to be doing that. I've been doing this solo harp guitar music for a long time, and I was on 2 albums in America there recently, a harp guitar label, I think the name was Greg Miner, another great producer, someone I respect very much. We were able to do 2 albums. I was on 2 of his albums, and I'm very happy with that music. But little by little, I got back into doing the metal. Because, Madmen Sinners is metal. And Madmen Sinners 2 was actually written as well. And I could have finished that album. It was even more along the lines of gothic metal, you know. I mean, but I went into the harp guitar thing and got immersed into that. Now I'm coming out of that, and I've gotten immersed into this musical, which is called The Cage, and it is an opera. Metal, you know, it's metal, but it's a real true opera in the sense of, you know, Phantom of the Opera. You've seen?
Sure.
Okay. I saw Paul Stanley, by the way, in 1999. I saw Paul Stanley do Phantom of the Opera in Toronto with at Pantages Theatre. It was incredible. And as I said, I saw Ian Gillan do Jesus Christ Superstar when I was a kid. And here, 30 years later, I see Paul Stanley in you know, doing Phantom of the Opera. So there must be some, you know, influence going on now, because this musical that I'm doing now is, well, I think it's more of an opera. It's called The Cage, and it's very much along those lines. What it is, very, very quickly, it's a very compelling story about a guy who's wrongly convicted of a crime, and he's sentenced to 50 years and 50 days. And it's not a prison, but he's sentenced to this cage, which is only about, you know, 5 feet high. But it's this beautiful silver, bright silver cage, really fat bars, you know, big fat, 2-inch thick bars, you know. And it's a cage where no light enters. So it's completely dark in this cage. He's been wrongly sentenced to spend the rest of his life in this cage. And the story goes that he is tempted by the devil, who has the key to the cage. So, you know, that's one side. And then there's an angel that comes and also tempts him with pure love, unconditional love. So it's a classic, you know, it's a classic story of conflict between good and evil, basically. You know, nothing new there, but the way the story ends is, you know, because of this conflict, the music really, you know, it's very conducive to expressing the music, you know, expressing the story through metal. The metal is just so powerful. You don't need the full orchestra, although we're going to have a full chorus, you know, of Gregorian singers and opera singers singing this. It's really going to be done just like you'd see it on Broadway. But we don't need to have a full philharmonic in the background, because it's going to be metal with the band. And, well, anyway, to finish the story, in the end, the devil loses and the angel wins. And the angel and this prisoner fall in love, basically. And at that moment, you know, there's this huge conflict with the angel and the devil, which is expressed through the music. And when they fall in love at that moment, the prisoner, he himself turns into an angel, and he's able to go to heaven, you know.
Cool.
Yeah, because the angel itself didn't have the key physically to open the door, you know, as the devil does, right?
Right.
But she doesn't say that if you fall in love with me, you'll go to heaven. You know, she doesn't say that. She just wants to give him the rest of his life, fill his life full of unconditional love, and that's the point of her, you know, coming down from heaven. But it just turns out that he also becomes an angel, and he goes to heaven. So it's a love story. It's a conflict between the devil and an angel, and it's metal, you know.
Awesome. So
and it's just coming so quickly now. We just performed 6 pieces last Friday. Last Thursday, I think it was, in Tokyo. And, you know, here we are in Japan playing this music. And this is the kind of stuff that you'd want to see, you know, like, as I just said, at Pantages Theatre in Toronto. You know, that's the kind of stuff that's the kind of thing. So it's not the kind of music that you're going to see played in a small club. So what we're doing now is we're playing the music as I'm writing it. We're performing it in clubs just to get it, you know, out, just to perform it and just make the music, you know, performable and present it up until that point. But once the opera is finished, we're not going to be able to perform it, you know, on a regular basis in clubs. We'll have to be out, you know, in a full theater type of situation. So, yeah, the music is really exciting, and it's pulling me very much into the cage. You have to immerse yourself into the music in order to really express what you want to express. You've got to really be immersed, and that's the way it is with all my albums. But it's nice to have that feeling again, because it's been a while.
Oh yeah.
Oh, it's been a while. Yeah.
And what are the plans? When do you expect to have it in production then?
Well, I've already had some interest, believe it or not, because I really haven't put out the word so much on this to anyone, but I've had some interest from one of the major labels in Japan here, which is great, because major labels these days, it's a different ball game than what it used to be. Remember, I was telling you about all these big budget stuff that we were able to do. It's not like that nowadays. So I think, so I assume, but it's nice to have interest in it already. And so what the plan is, just to finish the work, and hopefully, I'll have it finished by the end of the year. And I think at this pace, I'll probably finish the composition before the autumn, and after that, I'll work more on the choral parts and the orchestration, and then that. But the basic pieces themselves are going to be performable prior to that, and then after that, well, I'll get the record deal and or the licensing deal, I should say, and put it out. But it's going to take a lot of, as I say, do re mi to make it work. You figure the chorus. If you pay a chorus member $150 per night, and if you got 30 people in your chorus, right off the bat, just to get the chorus to sing with you, it's $4,500 for one night. So these are the kind of logistics that you kind of work with, but it's worth it because the music is so compelling, and we're seeing this now every not every night, but every time we perform the music. There's always new music that's coming out and being performed, and every night we play. And you really get that feedback from the people, even though they don't understand the lyrics over here, Right, yeah. They may not understand the lyrics or the overall story because it's not together yet, but they're still going to have a response to the overall music itself. So the response is good then for where you're at this point? Yes, very much so. And I do explain somewhat the story ahead of time so they kind of know what the story basically is about, and this is all in Japanese, just speaking in Japanese. But then prior to each tune, you'll explain what this tune expresses somewhat. And some of the tunes are really, really long, so you do want to have some talking in between before you start playing the real long pieces, and just to get people up to date about what they're listening to, But again, Japan is really great. But then again, I really wonder how much do they understand about what the music is about? Because if you don't explain it, what the music is about. It could be it doesn't have to be my music. It could be anyone's music. If you don't really sit there and explain it to someone, then it's like watching a movie but not really understanding what they're talking about. You're kind of only getting half. You're getting half of the story, right? So I wonder about it sometimes here. But and no complaints. We're here, and I've got a wonderful, supportive band that's just incredible. And because we're doing stuff in like 13/8, changing to 10/8, and going into 5/4. And when I write this stuff, I don't even think about it. I don't even know that they're in these odd time series. I have no idea. I'm just playing it in my studio. And then when I go to write the score out, oh, it's in 7, oh, it's in 9, it's 11. Nothing's in 4/4 anymore, No, it's true. And then I hand it to the band members. I usually send them a recording ahead of time, and they can't figure out where the one is, Right. Which is okay. I mean, next time I'll pull a click on it for you and maybe give you a little hint, But when they come to the rehearsal, it looks very, very difficult to play. And I know we're not the only band in the world to be doing this kind of odd signatures. I'm not saying that at all. But what I am saying is we'll have like one rehearsal before we perform the stuff in concert. One rehearsal, and that's it. And that's how good these guys are. That's what I'm trying to say. The music is very difficult to read and express, but after one rehearsal, bam, we perform it. So I'm lucky to have these players in Japan.
And you mentioned that you'd done some work for Madmen Sinners 2. You'd kind of written it, I think you said. Do you have any plans to revisit that and finish that up?
No, I don't. And actually, James is on it. James is on that album, believe it or not. So I've got some unreleased tracks of James singing his heart out, and he actually sang better than he did on the first Madmen album. So he was the one that wanted to do those other tracks and during the Madmen's sessions, and I said, no, James, I just rather focus on this album right now. But thank God he kind of forced the issue. I want to do these other tracks, because those tunes were already written by that time, and he knew them and he wanted to do them. So he's the one that kind of pushed me to record those tracks during the original Madmen sessions. So I still have them, and it's actually more satisfying to me than the original Madmen album. But no, I'm just too busy with this other stuff, Brian. Yeah, I'm immersed in that. So just to answer your question, no, I'm not. I don't have any plans to release the Madmen 2. But it was licensed. They had the first. The record companies had the first refusal for it, and if I had finished it, I know they would have taken it. But I let it go, and so I might just kind of put pieces out. I might throw something up on YouTube and maybe get 300 views.
Or Earlyworks Volume 2.
Or Volume 2, yeah, right. Yeah, look, it's going to be 10 years old. I guess I can call it. So
outside of, you've got this big project, but you also mentioned you're doing some training to prep younger students to go off to college. It sounds like you've got a bunch of other smaller things that you keep busy with as well.
Sure.
I'm really interested in that. Maybe we can finish up on that in terms of working with these students and how satisfying it is to work with these kids.
Sure. Well, in Japan, there are international schools over here, which means the students don't go through the regimen of the Japanese school system. Okay, so they're much more. There's much more flexibility as far as what they study, and their creativity is nurtured more so than in a Japanese school environment. So what I end up always getting, should I say, are students that are in international schools here that are fluent in English, amazingly fluent in English and Japanese most of the time, both languages. They're bilingual, and who really have promising talent and musicality that I haven't found with too many other Japanese private music schools, which I'm also very much affiliated with. Just for some reason, these international schools are turning out these very talented young, like from 16 to 18 years old, students that are fluent in English and really have something going on as far as talent. So they're the ones that want to go to Berkeley. Those are the ones that come to me that want to go to Berkeley. But the Berkeley audition is, as I said, there are definite criteria that are very important to Berkeley's application requirements. So yeah, I prepare these students, and there's no guarantee, of course, they can pass the audition. But one of them just took an audition last February 7th, I think it was. They just took an audition. Hopefully he'll pass. If he doesn't, he should try again. And so the students over here are international school students, most of them, because they can speak English, first of all, and they are talented. So we prep them. So it's basically a 1-year course. And it's not every day for me. It's just like once a week. I'll pry myself from my studio and go up and but it's nice because they know, they're learning from someone who's already been there and done that. They want to get out there and license their albums or perform, and they want to do all these things. They have these dreams that I think most people who aspire to being artists have. And so I'm able to hopefully steer them in a direction that will be, meaningful and for their life, and So yeah, that's what we're doing over here, once a week.
That was the career of Tim Donahue, and this is some rehearsal audio of Tim and his band working on his new project, The Cage. Very cool stuff. Also, for any Springsteen fans out there, I guested with BJ on his awesome podcast, Rock and or Roll. So this week we were talking about Springsteen's new box set, The Ties That Bind, which is the leftover tracks from the River album. I encourage you to go check it out. And that's it for now. I'll be back in 2 weeks with a new episode. You can find me online at Facebook or Twitter at The Double Stop, or email me at brian@thedoublestop.com. I'm Brian Sword. Thanks for listening.